Welcome to the Weekly Wrangle. Before we get started today, I want to let you know there's some leaf blowers outside. So if you hear like mechanical power tools in the backdrop, unfortunately, that's just going to be how it is today because, yeah, they got some leaf blowers out there. But anyway, welcome to the Weekly Wrangle. My name's Tyler, if we haven't met yet. And this is all about art critiques, constructive critiques, as well as industry news and a live hangout. So as you guys are watching, feel free to add stuff to the chat. I'll kind of keep a side eye over here as to what you guys are saying. And for today, I also want to let you know that we have about 13 hours left for the Black Friday Cyber Monday sale at CG Forge. So if you guys are interested in subscriptions, flat price options, consultations, again, this applies to everything. So feel free to use that code at CG Forge. And if you have any questions, you can also email me at tyler@cgforge.com, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have. But anyway, that's what's going on here at CG Forge. I also want to let you know that I recently came out with certifications. So if you go to the very top here, this is something I haven't really announced yet, but it's live now. You can get certifications for beginner, intermediate, and advanced levels. So the way it works is that you go here to the certifications, you watch these specific courses, and as long as you meet these requirements, you can get a certification. And that involves not only just me appreciating your efforts, sending you a PDF and a unique certification ID, but it also is me trying to publish your stuff to social media to let everyone else know about your accomplishments and to hopefully highlight your work in a positive way. So you have beginner certifications. We have the Houdini specialist certification. That's like an intermediate level kind of thing. And then we have the Houdini mastery certification for advanced users. And so I think of this mastery as the last step before you actually go and get that job that you're after. So that is about that as far as certifications go. I also changed up the website design, so it's a lot cleaner now. And there's a lot of good stuff going on right there. Last but not least, this morning, I released a new masterclass with flip simulations, specifically adhesive flip sims. So if you ever try to get water to stick to stuff and kind of wrap around objects, this is exactly what we're doing here. And I go into really great detail on how to control that with your fluid simulations. So this is completely for free. Be sure to check that out on YouTube because it's a really useful technique, not just for water, but for pyro and also for magic effects as well. You can do some really cool abstract stuff with this. Okay, so with that being said, let's dive into some constructive critiques, some art reviews. I didn't spend too much time looking at this ahead of time. I basically went to Twitter, did hashtag Houdini, and this is what we have. So let's start here actually at the side effects page. And this first one here is by Thomas. And so he has this one. It's titled Instantly Calm, which is very clever. I like that pun. So I'm going to maximize this. And let's go ahead and watch this through for a little bit. It's very, very zen, by the way. We don't have the sound going here, but imagine like a beautiful zen, like oriental violin going on or something of that sort. It's very peaceful. I love, by the way, this lighting, and that's something I'll talk about here in a minute. But yeah, it looks like this also might be like an L Systems or something of that sort. But yeah, it's basically a lot of these close-up shots, panning around, beautiful foliage. And again, what really stands out to me is the volumetrics. The sense of scale is really great here. And the just the pacing of everything too. Even if you don't have the audio, the way that the camera is panning on everything, except for that part, was very zen, which is cool. Okay, so let's break down things that are great, things that can use improvement. First of all, I love the establishing shot. Basically, this entire time, we're starting with something that's really close up and we're gradually going further and further away. That's a really great thing to do in general, by the way. And if you go back and forth between these really close macro shots and something that's a bit more mid distance, if you go back and forth like that, it really adds a lot of variety to these cuts. Oftentimes, when we're making cameras, it's very tempting to keep the same focal length and the same depth of field and the same distance from the subject from each shot. But when you change all of those camera settings and you go from one different camera to the next, it just adds so much dimension to the overall story arc of your project. So this is a really good example of that. The other thing too, again, is just really the lighting. The lighting just makes all of this, because if the lighting was not what it is, this wouldn't look half as good as it does. It's a beautiful cloudy day. One thing that definitely needs some improvement though are the branches. And like this, unfortunately, does not hold up very well. And it doesn't hold up well for texturing issues like this, but it also doesn't hold up very well with these interaction areas. And the overall shape as well is just a little bit too weird as it juts like directly out of that branch. From a distance, it's not going to be an issue, but if you do ever get this close to something, then I'd highly recommend doing like a scan or something that's going to keep that detail looking awesome. So I guess if it was me, I'd either not get that close to a problem spot and I would avoid it entirely, or again, replace that with something else so that the detail isn't lost in the model. Because, you know, from this distance, it totally looks great. But it's just those like wooden branches really that are kind of lacking. Now, the other thing too to think about is that right now, there's only one kind of plant species in this scene. And it's kind of subtle, but if you were to add another plant species in here, you would definitely feel more of that realism. And it's just something that our eyes are used to. Our eyes are used to seeing different kinds of plant varieties at all times. So one mistake people make is that if you have any shot that doesn't have multiple plants, your eye automatically knows that something's kind of weird, something's up with that particular thing. This shot, by the way, where it changes the focus and it goes further out is awesome, especially because you have those volumetrics going back. That adds an incredible sense of scale. And what I like is that it was just appropriately done. It wasn't overdone. It wasn't underdone. It's just enough to make it feel like that's a fair bit away from the camera. So that is great. And yeah, again, just kind of issues like that could definitely use some improvement. But overall, I think that this is awesome. It captures the vibe. It captures the overall feeling. It's very zen. I think if you add a few more plant species, a little bit more variety in those instances, and you fix up the weird trunk issues like right here, this would be superb. So great job, Thomas. Okay, let's go to another one here. This one is by Messrup. And I found this, I believe, through the side effects page. So I can't really full screen this, unfortunately, but take a look at this. The lighting, super cool. The shading is also awesome. I believe that this was shaded with Redshift, and it might be using that new subsurface shader that they came out with, which is just looking great. So a few things to think about. On the simulation side, it's really cool. It takes on this very unique shape. And it looks like if we go down here, Mess had said that basically he sculpted the initial velocity. So what that means is that you have the initial shape that you sculpt out ahead of time. It's like an invisible object almost. I believe that's what he's talking about here. And then you make the velocity try to follow the shapes of that initial object. So that's what kind of gives this initial burst right here. And it's great because it allows you to have an interesting velocity. One thing that'll help all of your fluid sims, no matter what you do, especially if it's like a burst like this, is to have a lot of variety in your velocity field. And sculpting it is a very artistic way to control that. And well, it gives you great results like this. So that's one thing. The other thing that's also great about this is, again, the lighting. The lighting is really cool. We have, I believe, an HDR, maybe like a studio preset or something. And that preset is just being spun around. It's being animated, kind of giving this interesting progression. And the awesome thing about animating that HDR is not just the shadows and the shapes of everything, which is being emphasized, but it's also the different qualities of the subsurface scattering that gets brought out. So if you ever have something where you're trying to emphasize the shape and you're trying to make it dramatic, and especially if you have subsurface like this, moving the lights around is going to be a really good call, because then that's what gives all of this interesting detail over time. So that's a really great execution of all this. And as far as constructive critique goes, I've been very generous with the compliments here. But let's talk about some constructive critiques. We do see towards the end here that the quality starts to suffer a little bit. It's subtle and probably not a big deal, honestly, but right down there, it kind of breaks apart a little bit. So let's see if we can find it again. Right down here towards the end. And so this is what happens a lot of times when you have a fluid and it's like a small scale sim like this, and it's starting to get stretched out. You start getting these kind of like bumpy shapes that occur. And again, not a huge deal here, but if you wanted to fix that, what you can do is you can take a look at the reseeding parameters and try to add more particles in the areas that are going to be stretching out like that. What that will do is it'll prevent that distortion from occurring, and it'll prevent that sort of weird breaking apart look. So not a huge deal, honestly, but it's definitely something that you would want to watch out for in a sim like this. And the other thing too is I kind of wish we had more of that footage just in general. I mean, that's not really a critique, but it's just something I think this could have lasted a little bit longer, honestly. And yeah, and then one last thing too is I think that a little bit of camera animation would have been nice. We do have the nice like speed up and slow down effects happening, which works great. But if the camera was just had a little bit of shake or a little bit of panning, this would feel even better, in my opinion, just very subtly. So anyway, there you go. That is a great project there, Mess. So great job. I can't go a weekly wrangle without talking about Luke Penry, apparently. But he is seriously one of my favorite artists right now. And I think maybe we talked about this last time. I apologize if we did, but this is a piece that I really enjoyed. And I don't know why I keep bringing up Luke's work, because it's really hard to critique, honestly. Like everything's super dialed in. But yeah, this is brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. We have a story, it's looped, and the animation is fantastic as well, as he's kind of like trying to grab that mushroom over there. I think it's awesome. The one critique I would have, it's not really a critique, it's more of like an idea, is that it would have been really cool to see him panting a little bit, just kind of see his stomach bulge out and move. I think it would have added a lot of character to the mouse guy here. But yeah, I mean, it's not even really a critique. That's just fun, right? So anyway, I just thought I'd share that if you guys haven't seen that project yet, because it's super cool. Okay, this one here is Knox CG. And he recently came out By the way, I love the style in general of all this kind of stuff. I think it's super cool. And I think this was using Houdini for the groom, I want to say. I hope that's correct. Maybe it's not. I saw this as like a side effects thing, like posted at side effects. But anyway, what a cool character, right? Look at this little chainsaw, horrifying little guy, right? It's got a couple little fangs coming out, a little chainsaw right there. Looks like a little handle for a tail. Brilliant. What can make this better, right? I do think it's a little weird and awkward with how this chainsaw is like just put right in his head. It would have been maybe nice to see something done around here, even if he just has like a big old like mohawk tuft of hair going on, right? And if we're talking about the grooming, I think it would be cool not only to give him like a little mohawk to cover up that interaction, but it would also be cool just to kind of have different patches of fur as well, just to kind of make it even more interesting. So that would be my critique as far as the groom goes. This is stylized, so you do have artistic liberty with all that, of course. But I would have liked to see just a little bit more of a detailed groom on that, and I think it would have been nice. So, really cool little dude. Great job, Knox. Okay, let's go ahead and move on now to some RBD sims here. This is by Mayor Awesome. And this is some destruction R&D. So this is not a finished project. This is just some simulation research ideas, right? So we have 4 different skulls. It looks like 4 different glue strengths here, keeping everything together. And one of the things that I always notice in any RBD simulation, and this doesn't just apply to Mayor here, this applies to everyone, is how the pieces settle on the ground. Notice how we have all these little dancing guys towards the bottom. We have all these pieces, they just kind of keep on wobbling. This is unfortunately the default behavior that you have to deal with whenever you have an RBD simulation. And there's actually a quick tip that I put out recently on YouTube that goes into how to settle those down. But basically you need to put a drag on them and just these little tiny pieces on the ground so that they stop doing that. So a drag for not only a pop drag spin, but also a pop drag, both of those things to get them to settle down properly. So that's really kind of the main critique I had. The main constructive critique is just figure out how to settle those pieces. And just in general too, I think the fractured shapes look decent, but it might be a little bit too small. Like it might be a little bit too much as far as like how brittle that bone was. I think if you did have bone, it wouldn't crack. It wouldn't just like dissolve quite like that. I think it'd be a little bit stronger, a little bit higher on the glue constraint, like at the bottom right. And the pieces would probably be bigger with maybe little tiny shards coming off of bigger shards. So less medium size, more big size, and more small size, I think would look good for this sort of thing as well. But this is totally going in a cool direction, and what a great test and what a great way to compare settings. So good job there, Mayor, and hopefully it continues going well. Okay, this is by Kuvaca, Houdini Smoke and Fire Effects. Let's check it out. So, first of all, the shading is really cool. I dig the shading. Okay. Notice that little smoke and ember towards the beginning. This part right here. That makes a huge difference in pyro. So like whenever we talk about pyro, people think about the pyro solver, right? And that's obviously a big part. But the other thing about pyro is that smoke and how that smoke's lit up by the surrounding fire. That's all this glowy stuff, right? And the little sparks and embers. So one thing I immediately like about this is the fact that that's included. Now, I like that, though. I like those elements, and I think that it should have kept going here. Like we should have maybe little molten sparks and little, falling little bits of things, right? Falling off of this object and hitting the ground. that would have looked awesome. And all you would really have to do is just keep that simulation running on everything. So I think that would have been an improvement in this case. Also, one thing that I think is cool about this is just how contained the fire is. I mean, it looks like maybe there's a velocity field spinning it around the object or something like that. But that is really cool to have that contained pyro effect. It doesn't just turn into one giant blob that goes up in the air. So that's also another thing that makes this particular effect unique, and something to think about in your pyro sims as well, right? If you have a pyro sim, are you just going to make a big old blob like everyone else, or are you going to try to make interesting velocity directions and try to direct it in some kind of cool way that looks different? That velocity sourcing, that velocity detail makes a huge difference, not just to the simulation itself, but also when you go to shade all of this, because when you have a detailed sim, you have detail to shade, and it makes it look that much better. So great job here. Love the shading. I think it's working out very well. Again, I just would have loved to see more of that molten stuff dropping off of that object. So great job, Kuvaca. All right, how are you guys doing over here? Looks like we have Alexi. He's tuning in, so good to see you. We have, who else here? Oh, thank you very much, Kanhaya. Hopefully I said that correctly. I appreciate that. And yeah, this was on the first project we looked at from Sohail. So yeah, it's very nice to see you all, and thank you for tuning in. We also have Nico right here. Howdy, Nico. And yeah, all that fun stuff. Cool. Let's go ahead and switch gears now to the next project. Okay, so we have Marco. Let's check this out. Let's start from the beginning. We have kind of a blizzard thing. He's walking in the snow, little smoky guy. Really cool. The first thing I want to say about this is that the idea and the breakdown is really, really cool. I love these breakdowns that have a progression from like wireframe to maybe like basic shader to the shaders are on and to you layer effects. When you have that happening, it's a really cool way to highlight your work, and it just makes everything feel alive. So yeah, really cool snow effects. I dig it. Looks awesome. The environment is okay, I would say. It's not bad, but I kind of wish, let's see. Well, it's really not that bad. I think that this is pretty cool. I would actually like to see a little bit more perhaps detail in this mid area, because when you want things to go far back in the frame, it's not enough to just have like something in the back, like mountains like this. Typically, you want to have something here, something in the middle, something kind of closer to the character, and then something close to the camera. The more layers you can have between the camera and the furthest object, the further it feels like you're reaching into the frame. So that would be one idea to help the scale, the almost like the distance here going back. So that's really cool. Now, I also feel like part of this effect, like it's cool that he's a walking smoke man, but I would have liked to see maybe just a little something else. Maybe some ground interaction would have been really cool, like some kind of magical like thing that's affecting the terrain. It just feels like this guy is not interacting with the environment, or is not really part of the environment. So as you're making these effects, think about that interaction. Think about, how can I make this thing interact with the things around it? And I think that always adds a lot of charm to whatever the project is. So that's what I would do to try to take this to the next level. I mean, even I think just a little bit of a shadow, a little bit more of a shadow here would have been really cool. But again, it caught my eye because of this whole breakdown. I thought that was really cool, especially with like the snow and the black backdrop. That was really nice. And anyway, really cool idea there, Marco. So great job. Okay, so this is a question here by K3D Effects. How do you submit your work for review? Just email me, tyler@cgforge.com. I typically just pick these all out at random, but if you guys have work that you'd like me to go over, if you'd like me to pick apart your work, then just go ahead and send me an email, tyler@cgforge.com, and I'd be happy to take a look. Okay, where are we at on time here? I think we're getting kind of close, so I might skip ahead a little bit here. Let's go maybe like 3 or 4 more of these, okay? Oh yeah, actually, so I want to tell you guys about this. I saw that what he recently posted this Scales HDA, and normally I don't try to promote other people's stuff, and he hasn't paid me or anything like that, okay? But this Scales HDA is awesome. If we take a look here at his Gumroad, it's only $100, which honestly is nothing for a tool like this. And basically, I mean, it kind of says it right here. You can school for a week, or you can go ahead and just make scales, draw it out. It's amazing. Also, I really love the music on this too. It's a lot of fun. So, if you guys haven't seen this, you should definitely check it out because this is a great HDA. Yeah, if you do scale work of any kind, like CFX work, I feel like this is almost like a must, to be honest with you. And it's also GPU accelerated, so it should run pretty fast. I haven't tried it yet, but I was really impressed by all of this. So, yeah, there you go. Great job, what? I mean, I think he spent like maybe 2 months making that, so it's really, really impressive stuff. Okay, cool. So there's that, and then also I wanted to show there was a really cool breakdown here by Danchez that I found. So it's this black and white kind of environment here. And well, first of all, this is very Star Wars themed, which is cool. But it's not just like your typical Star Wars. It's black and white and it's subtle. One thing about fan art that I think works really, really well is when you're subtle about the fact that it's a fan art. And this is a good example of that. It took me a second to realize we got a little R2-D2 down there. We got a little Death Star in the back, right? And but the fact that it took me a second to recognize it made it that much more satisfying when I recognized it. And so that's why if you guys want to do fan art of any kind, make it subtle, make it like not in your face entirely, because that is very, very effective and it gets people hyped once they see little R2-D2 right there. So I don't know if that was intentional or not, but that's a really cool thing to do. So here we have some height fields, really great breakdown of all this, by the way. And we may not go through the whole thing here, but yeah, little Death Star, little camera. We even have a Millennium Falcon in there. I didn't even see that. And yeah, his Twitter page is Danchez_CGI. I believe he might have some additional breakdowns that are just like this. And those breakdowns are really cool to take a look at. Very simple scene, but it's done well. It's executed well. And that's totally awesome. Okay, here we have Hardlate. This is a little bit of R&D that didn't get to see the light of day in production, but this is like a flower, it looks like. So I'm guessing that's a bit of frost on the flower, like some frost, some actual flowers, and maybe this like middle section right here. And one thing I immediately like about this is the fact that we have contrast. We have contrast between summer and winter. And you can even argue you have this contrast between life and death. As a matter of fact, if you wanted to make a really cool personal project, take this idea and instead of doing like summer or winter that you're contrasting, try contrasting like life and death, especially if it's like a flower. You can have this like one part of the flower or like one part of the scene kind of wilted away and like dead and like decayed, like almost undead. And then another part of the flower that's bright and summery and vibrant and full of subsurface scattering and life, right? So that would be really cool, especially if you took maybe like a diagonal change in the environment here and you had like almost the backdrop change as well, like this dark green kind of stormy cloud, and then like that changes to like some kind of bright summery thing on the bottom left here. But the more contrast you bring to your projects, the more eye-catching it's going to be. And that contrast can be with colors, it could be with, tone, it could also be with like these contrasts of subject, like life and death, or like summer and winter, right? Contrast is interesting. It's what grabs our eyes. It's what makes us interested in things. And so this is a good example of that. Now, as far as things to improve, this could use a bit more subsurface scattering. I never like it when it's just a solid color backdrop. I think something in there would improve that. And also on the frost itself, I would like to see a bit more variety and maybe just a bit more of a look at reference. I think that the shapes are cool and the detail looks great, but I just wonder if it translates well enough to frost. And I'm assuming that that's frost. It could be mold. I'm not really sure. But the fact that I don't know means that you probably need to look at a little bit more reference just to really try to match it a bit better. And maybe also reveal some of the flower underneath it as well, just to break up the shapes and break things up even more. So that's what I have to say about that, but a really, really cool project and really nice idea. So great job, Hardlate. Okay, and we already talked about Danchez here, but yeah, let's go last one here with Antonio, okay? Here we have a vellum disintegration, which is really cool. So first of all, really cool idea to use vellum to disintegrate things. Oftentimes we're trying to use like some combination of smoke and copy to points and instancing and all that, right? But the fact that this is vellum makes the shapes interesting. It makes the evolution interesting because all this wrinkles over time. I don't like how it initially sags right there. So I think I'd like to see things break apart before that. And also I think that the shapes could be a little bit more like broken up or have a bit more variety to the size, right? All of these little tears are about the same size. I would have liked to see more organic shapes coming out of this, like giants, like a giant tear up here, and then maybe like some smaller tears and just more variety in like the size. And then the other thing too is I think some shading would have been nice for this. Some different shading would have been nice for this as well. I'm guessing that this is kind of like a black or like a glass colored, glass shaded thing on the inside. I'm not really sure what's on the inside there actually, but maybe like have some metal revealed or have some kind of texture, something that contrasts the cloth, that soft body, with something that's really hard, like a metal of some kind. Again, contrast makes things interesting, not just in subject matter, but also in material as well. So if we had this soft body looking thing and then we had iron underneath that, that contrast would have looked interesting. And also on the lighting, I think it would have been interesting to have a bit more of like a rim light wrapping around thing, a little bit more dimension from your lights. And I can't tell if this was rendered with aces or not, but I think maybe take a look at some mid-tone contrast as well when it comes to making these tones pop more. But anyway, this is a really cool idea, really cool simulation, and a great thing to bounce inspiration off of. Okay, guys, that about does it for today on this month's Weekly Wrangle. Next month, it's going to be December. And I have maybe like one quick tip coming out. I went crazy on the quick tips recently, if you guys haven't noticed. And so that'll be cool. That's going to be how to shade snow. So shade and light snow, essentially. And yeah, if you guys have any questions, comments, critiques, again, you can always hit me up, tyler@cgforge.com. Thank you all so much for watching. Again, I apologize for the leaf blowers in the back, if you can hear that right now. And I hope you guys have a fantastic day.